ESPN is very good at hitting the air pump, the hot air pump, on making conversations about sports, no matter how trivial they might be. If you want to have a real race conversation, it has to go through mass incarceration, the country's history, a number of different police brutality. Like, that's a real race conversation. This Kate Smith stuff is just the way we talk about it in sports, like the safe space where we could talk about it. And yet still, Will Cain goes on First Take and says the following, and some people were bothered by what it is that Will Cain said. The backstory on this is the Flyers and the Yankees are removing themselves from Kate Smith's God Bless America because she wrote racist lyrics in the 1930s on other songs. And, I mean, the Hall of Fame has a racist in it in Ty Cobb.
She sang them.
I understand.
She wasn't the writer.
Ty Cobb is in the Hall of Fame, guilty of racism by everyone's account. Maybe you should take him out of there while we're at it. If you're trying to scrub all this stuff clean, all of this feels like an overreaction to me. But I also think that we need this kind of overreaction so that Will Cain can say this, and then we can have an overreaction to that.
I'm suggesting it's an absolute and utter fool's errand to go back through history, decades, someone who's been passed away for 30 years, incidents which occurred 8 decades ago, and apply modern historical standards to something you can almost reach a century. I'm suggesting that your standard, yours, only requires a handful of people to be a little outraged to go back and tear statues down. And I'm telling you that by your standard, President Obama's statues would not stand to today's standards when it comes to gay rights.
Stephen
and that to me is
Obama. That's fair.
Don't ask,
That's
don't
fair.
tell. What are you
That's
talking
fair.
about? Obama was openly opposed to gay rights, and by today's standards, that would be
my response would be, Will, that's pretty damn easy for you to say because you're not the offended party. It's real easy for the person or the group that's not the offended party to take that position.
And let me just
really
you're going. Will is latching on.
There will always be an offended party, though, Stephen A. And they'll make that argument to you one day as well.
Will is latching on to the point.
It doesn't appear to be with people that look like you, Will.
Will is latching on to the point.
Who brought up how I look?
Will is latching on to the point.
I'm just talking about my community compared to yours. That's all I meant by that statement.
What is Will latching on to?
Here's Max Kellerman finally getting in there.
Oh, nice.
After trying to get in there 7 times, Max finally launched his point.
Will, you're latching on to the point that Stephen A. made. You think the threshold is too low. Any offended party, if they're indignant enough, can change history. That is not my contention, and it's not the point I am here making. What I'm saying is in the 1930s, if someone was putting out racist lyrics, not everyone was racist, not all white people were racist, but many of them were. They were told oftentimes how wrong-headed they were. It's not as though they weren't aware of this. They made their choice. And by the way, black people were horribly disenfranchised and alienated and marginalized and oppressed. And now to say, well, that's the way it was then, and now even with the advantage of hindsight, well, look, yes, there was all this injustice, and, well, you know, we just got to go along with it now, that we can never correct anything. We can never, with the vantage point of history, say, you know what, bad. That was bad. You who supported that was bad. That argument doesn't fly with me.
There's no debate about the nature of the songs that Kate Smith sang. No one is here to excuse them. What we're talking about is how we treat history and the standards we apply. That's
Why play Kate Smith, Will? Why? There are plenty of renditions of God Bless America.
Ask the Yankees.
You're a longtime columnist. You and I have been arguing race-related issues for the better part of 30 years in the Miami Herald. You're the old white guy columnist who always castigates the athlete.
Getting older every day.
For misbehaving and for urinating on sportsmanship. What side are you on in this?
I want to make 2 points. Number one,
It's Dan, Stu, and Greg Cody on ESPN Radio.
Make the points you wanted to make.
Yeah, I would remove the rendition of God Bless America by Kate Smith, just because if people are rightly offended, then you should err on the side of caution when it comes to that. However, I do think an historical context is warranted. Not defending what Smith recorded and sung back in the day, 30s or 40s, but a black singer of the time named Paul Robeson recorded and sung the exact same song. So in the context of that era, I just think it's important to, and that's sort of what Will Cain was saying a little bit, I think, and I do think it's a point to consider in the whole weight of all this.
Pablo, what are your thoughts on this whole thing?
I don't know if we have the mechanism to make this decision. I really don't. And Dan, I say this because I just read an article this weekend, because I read things on paper sometimes, about the CEO of YouTube. And the CEO of YouTube got that job because she came from Google, had all of these abilities to make high-level corporate partnerships. But what she's found is that her job today is dealing with the millions and millions of videos that are uploaded to YouTube every hour, all of which make her a content moderator. That's not her job that she got into this for. She got into it to make corporate partnerships. But no, her job is to figure out what is okay and what is not on the internet. So the idea that we're debating, can Kate Smith and statues of Kate Smith or songs performed by Kate Smith, can those withstand our moral modern scrutiny? It's just another sort of little river off of this giant waterfall that is consuming all of us, which is what is okay and what's not in a world in which content has been unchained. And the same conversation we're having, maybe not the same exact one as First Takes, but it's happening at the highest levels of all of these tech companies, and they have no idea what to do.
Well, what can you do when what we're talking about here, Pablo, is that nobody was upset about this until it was put in front of a few people. Then a few were upset by it, but not so upset that they would actually have any problem with that statue in Philadelphia. Not so upset that many of them wouldn't go to the game or be even hurt by the fact that her God Bless America was playing. And so this small faction of people who aren't actually outraged, they're the minority and they should be heard on this. Then there's an overreaction to listening to their complaints. And then there's an overreaction to that overreaction as people argue about Will Cain. And what the conversation they're having is just bringing all the baggage. They just want to have a race conversation, and this one will do.
Yes, and the funny thing about how we have these race conversations, beyond needing, as you point out, the gift wrapping of sports, is that we really mostly like talking about the messenger of problematic messages. We never actually enjoyed talking about the problematic message. This is why Colin Kaepernick was the thing that we all glommed onto for so long. It's because we never had to address the actual substance of the conversation. There were just all of these fun exit ramps for all of us, whether it's Will or Max or Stephen A. or me and Bomani or you, to jump off and get to another thing we were interested in that oftentimes really was a distraction away from the fundamental thing. Like Kate Smith is not important. Period. To our society, to our world, she's not. But the idea of people being heard and their pain being felt and their pain being taken accounted for, that's what really matters. And the problem is that these conversations are set up so that we never actually get to the message. We're just stuck on whether this lyric that she sang was truly racist in this time or that time, when that's not actually important.
I think for me, what's happening is that the country's more polarized than at any time in my lifetime. And what that's done is eliminate the middle ground. We tend to take one extreme or the other. So I'm not allowed to say, you know what, I recognize and appreciate that Kate Smith was not perfect, but yet, man, that rendition of God Bless America is pretty iconic from a woman who's what amounts to an historical figure now. Nobody remembers when she was alive. It's all from black and white video. But there's not that middle ground available anymore. You either have to condemn what she did or you have to rise up in defense of her.
But by the way, there's a third way, and this is the way I've been sort of embracing on social media lately. Sometimes you don't have to say anything. Like, thank you, Dan, for dragging me into this conversation, but I was very happy to not have it. Like Bomani and I discussed, did we want to do this show do we want to do this segment, this topic on High Noon last week? And we were like, nah. And sometimes, by the way, nah, that's a pretty good answer. You know, sometimes there's really interesting stuff
not on
to get
First
to.
Take, Pablo.
It's always my answer.
Pablo, not on First Take. No, they've got 2 hours to fill.
Oh, well, on First Take, as someone like you guys who did First Take last week, a lot of my time was just performatively listening. Like, I was just trying to basically be, Charlie Chaplin. I was never under the impression that I was going to get in on any of these conversations.
What do you have the Bills doing at number 9?
Wow. Wow.
All right, Pablo. Good talking to you. Pablo Torre, Pablo and
What
Bomani.
you
Hi.
brought me in for?